Welcome to the Birth Protectors Podcast. I'm Rahelios.
And I'm Celeste, and we are bringing in a father's perspective on home birth.
All right, today we're going to talk about first-time births, first-time birthers, and if it's okay to have a baby at home, even unassisted, when it's your first baby. A lot of people are, of course, very apprehensive. And we certainly were. Well, when it's your first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You've never done it before. So it's totally understandable to be apprehensive.
Yes, fears are normal, but I knew that I wanted to have our first baby at home. There is a common misconception that having your first baby is somehow puts you in like a high risk category, or that you have to have a baby first before you know if you can have a baby, which is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. So I heard you just mentioned this term today that I'd never heard before, of a proven pelvis or something like this.
Yeah.
Which that sounds completely ridiculous to me. And when I hear that, I think right away, okay, this is going back to a really common kind of thought process that's in mainstream, which is, first of all, the human birthing process is broken and a woman's body is not optimally designed to give birth. It's inherently defective.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the whole paradigm that women are told and being led to believe over and over and over again. And of course,
all throughout the medical.
Yes. And they won't ever say that or admit that. Like, you'll never hear in mainstream, anyone, a nurse isn't going to tell you, oh yes, women's bodies are just defective and they're not made to give birth.
Actually, they have said that.
Okay, see, it's that bad.
There was a certain doctor on Instagram that made a post about how defective women's bodies were, and that basically anytime we try to give birth, our body's trying to kill us.
Oh, that's right. There's that whole idea that I've heard people talk about, that your baby is literally like an invasive creature trying to destroy you. And this is like an actual school of thought that a lot of women buy into, that baby is like, it's almost like it's a parasite inside of you and it's trying to destroy you. And you, as the host, have to fight for your life against this baby who has every intention of, surviving whether you do or not.
Which is absolutely ridiculous, because clearly the baby needs the mother when it's born. So nature would not design birth to kill off the mother, because then the baby would die.
Right.
So, that's completely flawed.
Right. Yeah. And now when you say nature needs, baby needs the mother, like, that's absolutely 1,000,000% true. Yet today, a lot of people would laugh at that, say, no, actually the baby doesn't need mom at all. It doesn't need dad. It doesn't need anybody. We've got all this technology, you got formula, a baby can just be born and it's just fine. It's just as well without a mother, without a father. Anyone can take care of the baby.
Just give it some food in a bottle. And
so modern.
So many things wrong with that.
Yeah, there's so many things. And, Celeste and I we come from a foundational belief system that is rooted in nature's design. And now nature's design, and again, I don't want to alienate anybody, because there's no reason to be alienated, because there is a truth. We're here, we exist. Whether you believe that we were created by God, or we evolved through a natural process, or some combination of the two, in any case, the reality is that we are a creation that's perfected, and the natural design is very much optimized in so many ways. And humans like to kind of create this idea that we can do better than nature. We can do things better. Technology is better. The new way is better. And while I'm not going to say that, no, we can't ever do better than nature, maybe we can, but before you could ever do better than the original design, the optimized design, you need to at least first get back to that optimized design and make sure that what you're improving is actually an improvement.
Yeah, not just screwing up nature's design.
Yeah. And so many times it's not that way at all. Just breastfeeding is one example with formula. If we're saying, well, okay, we're improving on the fact that so many women aren't breastfeeding their babies, and so we've optimized that by creating a formula and, put all the nutrients that a baby needs and all of that in the formula so that the baby can survive. And look, we've optimized nature's design. And the fact is, no, not at all. That there's no way that formula is optimal in comparison to a baby that's 100% breastfed.
Yeah,
from birth.
It's useful, obviously, when breast milk is not available for some rare circumstance, but it's not what's optimal.
Yeah, there's no way. But okay, let's get back to.
Yeah, we digress.
Sorry, I always do that. Okay, the original. Okay, is it okay to have your baby at home when this is your first baby? Like,
I would say it's even more important to have your first birth be a good experience, because if the first one is traumatic, it's going to be very difficult to heal from that. Besides the fact that your baby doesn't get a second birth. It's like, that's their start to life.
Yeah,
there's no do-overs.
Right. You might get a second or third or however many chances you want, but each of your children, that's their one experience. And it's so crazy because where we come from, like, I'm like, oh, you don't want to experiment with that. Like, you don't want to take a chance with that. You definitely need to have your baby at home. Like, that's what just wants to come out of my mouth naturally. And as I'm about to say that, I realize from other people's perspective, that probably sounds crazy because they're thinking, well, yeah, I don't want to experiment. That's why we're going to the hospital. Hello, we got modern technology, modern medicine. They have all the tools. They've got everything you need. What if there's an emergency? I don't want to experiment with having a home birth on my first child. That's crazy. Yet, when your perspective changes to if you could be where we are, it's completely the opposite.
Yeah, because that perspective comes from a fear-based program that we're fed our whole entire lives about birth and it being this dangerous medical procedure that is dangerous.
Yeah, it's a medical emergency because the human birth process is inherently defective. Either God made a mistake in his design, or nature, the evolutionary process that has led to everything existing was defective, and which is absurd because the whole process is that the optimizations is the only thing that survives, and which is why everything is optimized. It's just absurd. And the results prove that out. So again, women are led to believe that their bodies are defective so often. That's always the reason why all the interventions are done in the hospital, because there was something wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. Something was wrong with your birth process. All of the women that I can think of that have had a baby in the hospital that we've talked to, when they meet us and they're like, oh, you had your baby at home, their response is always something like, oh, I could have never had my baby at home because, and then they insert their birth experience and what they were told.
Mm-hmm. my baby would have died, or I would have died. And it's the same story over and over again. And so women internalize this experience, and they think that, they were just broken, or they just got unlucky, or, and it's really an unfortunate, disempowered way to begin your journey as a mother.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure this is why, if you're listening to this as a mother to be or father to be, and you have fear about, oh, I don't know, I just don't know about having a baby at home, it's certainly because you've talked to all of these people. You've talked to other women, your own mom, other women that that have had babies in the hospital, and they always have, every time, don't they, some story about why they couldn't have had a baby at home and why that would have been crazy because in their birth, this happened or that happened, or that, they always had to be induced, and, they ended up having to have a cesarean section, or the baby had to be resuscitated, or it wouldn't come out. They had to use the forceps. They had to have an episiotomy, and they had to get vacuum extraction. They had to have extra drugs added. They had to, the list goes on and on and on. And it's always like, oh, this is why I couldn't have had a baby at home. The pain. It was just so painful, even with the drugs, even with an episiotomy. It was like, I don't know how anyone could take that pain. And you guys, all that pain is, we have to be really careful with what you say, because this is just kind of going out in the public. So many interventions that often happen in a hospital birth are definitely going to be very painful and far, like, insanely beyond anything you would go through in an actual natural situation. Just inducing the birth is just a whole, waterfall cascade of things that are going to happen based on that are all very painful, and none of which would happen at home.
If you're induced, you're trying to force your baby to be born before they're ready, before your body's ready. It's like, that's obviously going to create more pain. You're trying to force something. And the drug, the Pitocin, is known to make artificially extra strong contractions that women that have had both unmedicated birth and a birth with the Pitocin, there's a big difference in the intensity of the contractions that the Pitocin causes.
Well, yes, it's completely unnatural state that they put you in.
That's just one thing. One thing that causes extra pain. There's so many things that I could mention.
And let's talk about that a little bit. So we had our first baby at home. We decided right from the start, it's like, no, we're going to do this right from the get-go, because, we got in that mindset. I'm very glad that we did. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Books we were exposed to, people that we'd talked to. Celeste was born at home herself. My grandparents had their babies at home, and but it just made sense to us as we realized that this is the way things are supposed to be, and this is the way we want them to be. So
it was really kind of just like a natural decision. It just made sense.
Yeah. Yep. And so, but you can make things more difficult than they need to be. And this often happens with this idea of like forcing the birth. So
even so-called natural induction.
right. Because so in a hospital, typically they're going to induce you, or if you show up, because you're having contractions, they're going to give you Pitocin to speed it up. The only time that doesn't happen is for the woman that waits to get to the hospital until the baby's practically falling out already, and they just show up and the baby plops right out the last second, which is like, you totally didn't need to go to the hospital for that. But otherwise, they're going to start forcing things because they always do. They just
even if your
always
baby
do.
is just born spontaneously after you get to the hospital without issues, they're going to intervene with the birth of the placenta. And it's standard procedure to give that injection of Pitocin for the placenta.
Oh yeah, and then they start yanking on it, and then often they'll rip it from the wall of the uterus, and then you start bleeding, and they're like, "Oh, look, now you're hemorrhaging. Oh, it's a good thing you were here. We can save you."
Because they're forcing it out before it's ready, and then they got to give you drugs to stop the bleeding.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so absurd. Well, but can you have your baby at home? Like, what do you? Is your body going to be ready? Like. Can the baby fit? Like people think, oh, I don't know if it's gonna fit. Well, you wanted to talk about our first birth, so
yeah.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah. So she was due on July 3rd and born on the 4th of July, which made me think at that time very naively that due dates were this very accurate measurement.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, no, now you're giving people the wrong idea. It's like, what is a due date, first of all? Somebody giving you their perception. So why did we even have a due date with her?
Well, it's just, a way of calculating from the first day of your period, your last period, and they have like a calculation so it's just this standard 40-week calculation. And
because we went to a midwife. And you had ultrasounds
did
and all
prenatal,
that.
Regular prenatal visits. There was a lot that I would do differently, even with our first birth. But
because we did do a lot differently later. But with the first one, we had standard prenatal care. And so that's what I'm trying to get to. It's like, why did we even have a due date? Because that's not even a real thing. But it's because we had prenatal care. So Celeste had someone telling her, okay, your baby is due on July 3rd. And miracle of miracles, it just happened to be pretty close because it didn't work out that way with a lot of the others.
It was not that way with the rest of them. But
anyway.
That's like a whole nother episode, I think. The due dates. Yeah.
But so July 3rd comes and...
Actually, it was July 2nd. Her labor was 2 days long. No, actually 5 days before she was due. I lost the cervical plug. And at this time, first time mom, I thought that was like the first sign of labor. I thought that meant labor was starting. But it didn't. And so naively, I thought, well, that must mean we should try to get labor going. And so we tried, all kinds of things, walking and nipple stimulation and
well, hold on, let's not just brush over that because okay, you can see Celeste was like, well, I should be in labor now, it's time. And this was our first time, remember, so we're like, we really didn't know what to expect. I was gonna say we didn't know what we were doing, but you don't really have to do anything. Nature takes its course. But we didn't know what to expect. So we felt like we had to do something. And we were like, oh, it's time for labor to start. And it's like, so are you like having contractions? What's going on? And so I was like, well, not really.
Shouldn't. And but when I would walk, it would bring on contractions. So it's like, okay, let's walk. Let's get contractions going.
Yeah. So we decided to walk, and we walked and walked
for miles.
Yeah, which was not something that we were like in the habit of doing throughout the pregnancy. Like, we were always active, but it wasn't like we were walking miles a day or even on a regular basis while you were pregnant. And all of a sudden, just to start labor, we walked for miles. It's probably 5 miles or more. I don't know. And so.
And no, it didn't make labor start.
Yeah. But it did make us really sore.
Yeah.
The next day.
Woke up the next day and I was like, oh, okay, I'm really sore. Why did I do that? So yeah, that's my biggest regret with our first birth is that we didn't just trust it to start on its own. We were trying to intervene with the process, even though naturally, and so many people do that, like as soon as they due date approaches or they go over their due date and they start getting stressed out because the doctor is saying, we're going to induce if you get to 41 weeks or 42 weeks. And so they start trying all the things to induce naturally. But inducing at all means that your body's not ready. There's absolutely no reason to do that, no benefit. And there might be some rare instances, but in reality, like if you have like eclampsia or something dangerous, then you actually need a C-section. Inducing doesn't, putting your body and your baby under extra stress doesn't really make sense if it's actually an emergency situation.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
That's basically going off of this one outdated study that, showed that outcomes were worse if the pregnancy went longer than 42 weeks or whatever. I don't know the specifics of the study, but that's what they're basing this off of.
Well, yeah. And gosh, when you get into studies, it's always, you've got to look at it again, like where I say, you've got to get back to an actual natural situation before you can decide if you're optimizing. And when we do these studies, we're studying, 1,000 births in the hospital. Like there's already been so many things that have taken that each of those childbirths completely out of a natural situation that you can't get meaningful data from a study like that and then say this is how things would normally occur.
Right.
Because it's vastly different. Having your baby at home it's a night and day difference. It's so different. That's why I say you can't get any meaningful data if you're studying. And then they'll study like women in third world countries, or they'll study and there's all kinds of nutritional deficiencies and things that can come into play, or you'll study, American women. And again, now you've got the standard American diet, and are people even healthy in the first place? And there's just so many things that can come into play that kind of make it difficult. It obscures the data in a way that what you're seeing is often not caused by what you might think, because there's so many other things that have already been taken away from square one,
Right.
the original natural process. So I would totally stand by what you said, though. There's almost never a reason to induce labor. And that's definitely what we've found at home. It's just your body will go into labor when it's time. And that's all you really need to know about that. Because when your body decides it's time to go into labor, they say you can't stop it. Actually, you can.
Yeah, the mind is actually pretty powerful.
If you put yourself in a stressful situation, like by going to the hospital, for instance,
you get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Or you start thinking a bunch of fearful thoughts.
Yep.
Your mind can, your body is very perceptive to your state, and like the body is only going to proceed with labor if it senses safety.
Yes, because you don't want to have a baby when you're being chased by a lion.
Yeah, it's a very intelligent design. So when women go into the hospital and they're like, "Oh, my labor stalled," it's like, no, that wasn't something wrong with your body. That was your body very intelligently responding to the subconscious threat of being in this unfamiliar environment and people poking you and checking you and checking, measuring your vitals and all this stuff, and putting you in a state of stress.
Well, yeah. See, okay, the stress hormone, because that's the whole thing. Stress, that stress hormone, or these stress hormones. It's not just one hormone. Adrenaline, being one of them. That's like, okay, danger. You need to, something's going on. And that's going to let your body know, okay, it's not safe to have the baby right now. So whatever process was about to happen, it's like, put it on hold. We got to get out of this dangerous situation. If you think about what normally happens today, not normally naturally, but what normally happens today
in a medical setting.
Yeah, or, you're home and it's like, oh no, I'm going into labor. I feel contractions. And it's like immediately, oh, is it time to go? Should I rev up the car? Let's go. Let's get in there. And it's like, one starts panicking and stress, like panic time, panic mode. That's going to definitely negatively impact your labor, because that's exactly the opposite, like exactly 180-degree opposite of what would happen naturally and what could happen when you're at home, what should happen, which is, as you start going into labor, it's like, okay, time to relax. Like, it's time to go into ultimate relax zone, stop everything, calm everything down.
All the distractions.
Yeah, just it's time to get into the zone and totally relax. And that is that's like step 1 and 2 and 10.
Yeah.
Just relax so you can allow the birth process to unfold.
Yeah. So having stress and anxiety about going into labor or about your approaching due date can actually cause your body to hold off on going into labor even further. But when you relax and just welcome it to come whenever your body's ready, whenever your baby's ready, it will come in the right time. You'll start labor in the right time. And that's how it was. We were like doing all these things to get labor going with our first baby. And then at some point we're just like, what are we doing? We laughed at ourselves and we're like, why are we trying to like interfere with the natural process? And so luckily we came to our senses and we're just decided, we're just going to wait and just see. Baby will come when she's ready. And so the rest of that day was just totally relaxed. And that night it was like, boom, started feeling the real contractions. And yeah, I had to get in that relaxed state first.
Yeah. And it's funny because, now I'm remembering we started 2 days early. It's like, oh, we're in labor. And so I was working a full-time regular job at the gas company at that time. So I took off from work like in a panic. Whoa, it's time to go have the baby. I got to go and get home. And it's like, all right, here we go. And then it ended up being days. So the next day, work is calling and they're like, so do we have a baby? And it's like, no. And actually, there's not really anything going. I guess we're in labor. And so I ended up, skipping a few days in a row that I didn't need to.
Yeah. Luckily, the weekend spanned over that. And then it was a holiday. Oh. So because she was born on the 4th of July.
That's right. Yeah.
So it ended up being good timing. But
yeah, it was a little funny I remember to be calling into work the next day and everyone's like, so how'd it go? And I was like, well, we're still in labor. Baby. And I'm looking at Celeste and she's just sitting on the couch like, doo-doo-doo. I was like, are we blowing it here? But no, we knew that it was imminent because you had lost the mucus plug.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, this is false labor, but yeah,
it's also also true that you can lose the cervical plug and then it can also seal back up. So that is not a determining factor. I happened to go into labor like a couple of days later, but sometimes that is the start of labor. That's how some of my labor started. Like it's like sure. right with labor starting was when I lost the cervical plug. But it can also be that you lose it and then it's kind of seals back up and you stay pregnant for a couple more weeks.
Yeah,
that's so.
That's the thing. There's so many different ways this can present, and it's still totally normal. It's not an emergency. Where if you put yourself in that medical situation, they're bound by protocol because they got to, they have protocol that they have to follow. So, again, this is where the medical interventions where they're checking because they're trying to monitor the situation are actually causing the problems that they then end up having to treat inevitably.
Yeah.
And that's just over and over and over and over. I can't even say enough overs again to tell you how much that occurs. But well, and another one. So again, with Serena, our first, it ended up being a pretty long labor where if we would have been in the hospital, absolutely guaranteed they would have termed Celeste failure to progress, especially because it was her first. They would have been like, oh, yeah, this is very typical, and maybe it is normal for your first birth to take longer,
Yeah.
but that's not a problem at all. It's definitely not an emergency, but they definitely would have, in that case, would have said, oh, this is failure to progress, because how long was that
So
first stage of labor? Yeah.
I labored, all night and all day, and I wanted him to check and, to see like how far I'm progressing.
Because this was our first time. Again, we were like totally new. I don't know. Was this okay? So.
Yeah. And there wasn't any dilation. Like there was basically no change still in the cervix. And,
and this was heavy labor at this point. Like,
yeah, like
I
didn't sleep. Like I was in very much deep in labor. Like I did not sleep at all that first night. And so after like discovering that like there was no change in the cervix, I was very discouraged. And that's another downside of checking is like you might think you're farther along than you are, and it just it can create unnecessary disappointment.
Because you have these expectations. Because again, it was our first time, so we had all these expectations of how things should go and how things normally go. And the medical protocol, there's this narrow range that they call normal, and they never let it get outside of that range very far. So
first stage of labor should last X amount of hours. Second stage of labor should last, about this long. And
if it doesn't, they're going to do something about it.
They're going to intervene. And then, it's the cascade of interventions from there. Like, so we definitely would have ended up down that path, and I probably would have ended up with a C-section, but that would have been completely unnecessary.
Yep, absolutely.
And I probably would have just been like, well, I guess I failed. My body failed. I just wasn't dilating. And so many women are told that, and they think that. And when in reality, they just needed more time. I just needed more time. Yeah. Maybe some position changes. We started doing some squatting to open up the pelvis, and that really, helped a lot.
It really sped things up. Yeah.
That really sped things up.
It was like, let's squat and let's breathe, just really relax. I was helping Celeste to just get in a relaxed state because she was pretty tense. Again, it was the first time. And then especially after no sleep. And then she was super sore because we walked and walked and walked and walked. She's like 9 months pregnant, about to give birth, and decides to go on this long walk all of a sudden. Again, it wasn't like we were working up to it or something. So there were a lot of things. And so she was a little tense. And what really helped is just relaxation. When I looking in her eyes and just, let's breathe together. Let's just squat together and relax together. And then things really started progressing then. This is like 2 days later, though, after of hard labor, where again, if we were in the hospital, we'd have never gotten there. And there's no way they would let it go that at all. No way.
Yeah. But, things started moving along after that, and we just flowed with it through the night, and she was born at just after sunrise.
Yeah, and it was a perfect birth. It wasn't like it was some stressful birth. There was just that long process of opening up that Celeste's body needed or chose, and there was nothing wrong. It was when it was finally time, when it was time for Serena to be born. She was born perfectly normally. She was totally healthy.
My body just took over pushing. Like the pushing phase was, pretty short. It was just, the fetal ejection reflex took over, and
Yeah, there's none of this push. That's insane.
Once your body takes over, like there's no holding it back. And I think I remember at one point you were like, slow down. I was like, I can't.
Yeah. See, that's one thing with all of our births. Like, I've never been like push. Like, this is what you see in every birth portrait. I don't know, and it happens in the hospital. It's like the push. They call it the pushing phase, and it's so hard, and it's like push, and woman is like straining, and that's like completely the opposite. Like, we're like, okay, just relax. I'm helping her. It's like, because the contractions are coming and they're really intense. And it's like, you don't need to push. What you need to do is relax.
Yeah. Your body is going to do the work.
Yeah. And so I'm just helping Celeste to like relax through these super intense contractions. And just imagine, you literally just want to relax the baby out. Allow your baby to just come out.
Yeah, as slowly and as gently as you can allow.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't have any tearing. It was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the episiotomy, that's like every birth.
Yeah, you either tear,
they slice you open,
or usually it's being
both.
Cut and you also tear.
Because they cut you, which they tell you they're cutting you so you won't tear, which is like, oh, we're going to cut you so you don't. It's insane.
So unnecessary. Yeah, it's so traumatic.
Totally unnecessary. It's totally unnecessary. Women, you are designed for your baby to come out. You don't need to be cut open for that to happen. That's like, it's literally barbaric, like medieval thought process that we're still stuck in.
Yeah, thinking you have to cut the opening up to make it bigger. It's like, no, there's so many things like.
It just goes on and on.
For one thing, being on your back compresses the opening that your baby travels through. You're not going to make up for that by cutting. Like,
right. And the fact that they've given you Pitocin and they're speeding up labor and they're making the baby come out way before it's time because.
Or if the mother's totally numb, so she can't feel anything and she's being forced to push and destroys her pelvic floor.
Yeah. And then they're sticking, the salad spoons in there and yanking on your poor baby's head. Like, we got to get this baby out now. As though it's not going to come out. Like, look into the literature. Find me a situation where the baby just doesn't come out. Like, that's not even something that happens. They always act like, oh, it's stuck. It's not going to come out. It's like, that's absurd.
Yeah, that would be so rare. I mean, if like the mother's pelvis was actually truly deformed.
Yeah, if you're deformed, it's some insanely rare thing. It's like the baby always comes out.
You're not going to grow a baby that's too big for your body to birth. It's just a fear that they put in women's head that their baby's going to be too big. They might get stuck or...
So many women, they tell that. Oh, your baby can't be born naturally. It's too big and you're too small. Yeah. Like, I've heard that a gazillion times and it's absolutely absurd. If you're a small, petite woman listening to this, I wish I could just give you the courage to realize that's absolutely absurd. You can have a baby perfectly fine, naturally. You're designed for it.
Yes.
That's the truth.
So, yes, first-time moms, you can have a home birth. Absolutely. And...
yeah. Just, well, we're going to do lots more podcasts. And there's so many comparisons between hospital birth and home birth. And it's just the comparisons really lead you to the realization that there's absolutely no comparison. The difference is not a small, subtle difference. It's not like it's a little better at home or slightly more comfortable at home. It's the difference between, having an experience that you'll cherish the rest of your life and going through the worst car accident of your life.
Yeah, which is like, combine that trauma with like meeting your baby, which is always going to be like a joyous moment. But when you have those two things mixed up together, it's very...
it's messed up.
Yeah.
And
it's not supposed to be that way.
Right, exactly. It is not supposed to be that way. And that is a part. I'll probably say this in every episode at least once. I believe that what's going on in birth today, and that's why we're doing this. That's why we're coming out, I guess you could say, because it's a huge foundational part of what's wrong with humanity. Why we all have these emotional distresses that are like programmed in our psychology. We don't even know where they came from. Well, a lot of it's right there. You're born in a hospital, and what's designed to be a beautiful, natural,
transformational,
flowing,
sacred experience.
It then gets mixed exactly like Celeste said. It's like mixed with like this horrible trauma, and so you have both of those together, and that's called normal today, and it's absolutely destructive to human psychology, to the mom, to the dad, and most importantly and especially to your poor little innocent baby in so many ways that we'll get more into. But please, so contact us. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. If you have any questions, we do have a website that's in the making. It's kind of in its beginning stages. This whole podcast is experimental, but it's birthprotectors.com. I'm going to put a contact form on there so you can send us questions and just contact us directly. We'd love to answer your questions on the podcast here and talk to you and find out what you're wondering about. What would you like to hear about? Yeah. Okay, well then that's it for now.
Until next time.
Yes, we'll see you again soon.